people are interesting, the people are moved, and even in an individual or a people, it's better. But now when it's all just like rationalizations and nonsense and nogginism, it's not fun, it's boring, it's frigid, it's stiff, it's dying, it's a signal of death in and of itself. Nietzsche went on to say that Plato and Socrates were the beginning signal of the Greeks' explosive energy dying, because they moved from being a people who were mythological, Homeric, energetic, fireball-like, to people who were neurotic, rationalizing, like Plato. Exactly what did Plato do? He studied the archetypes in Greek mythology and tried to come up with this idea of how do you create a new mythology, and rationally put together a new mythology that will be able to organize society in a more noble and moral way. Plato was a rationalizer. Plato was an intellectual coper who came after the golden age and the fireball age of the Greeks. And precisely, if you want to create a golden age, you don't start with the rationalizations that happen at the end. You start with the energy and causes that happened at the start. This is what Nietzsche saw, that no one else seems to see. And so our situation, our problem, where we're like lost in the culture crisis and the meaning crisis and all that, is because we are weak physiologically, because we are weak in spirit, because we don't have a will to competition, because we're stuck in the marring conceptual world of cope. Like meme analysis says, you've got this big web of concepts and blather that are sucking your libido up into it, and you're getting trapped in all these memes and ideologies in the internet, instead of living a life in the body, living a energized life that is free and actually based on the experience and the charge of the body. And if you wanted to orchestrate out an ideology or a worldview or a way of doing things, you would return to this first principle, start on this first principle, understand this first principle, and then build everything upon that. And maybe Jung stuff could come in and be integrated into that. I certainly believe that is possible. I don't think Jung is useless. I don't think Jung should be in any way dismissed. But I'm not sure if Jung is holistic enough. I think Jung actually fundamentally suffers from this, because the Jungians themselves have the specific trait of being neurotic, stuck in their heads, lost in an abstraction of symbols, lost, and they're not a creative first principle. They're usually up reorganizing, blathering about jargon, and they're not taken seriously. They're not good at being scientific, they're not good at being critical, and they're often sort of messianic in their worship of Jung's concepts, unable to establish their own concepts, and completely sort of low thumos, psychedelic addicted, weed smoking, low energy, low charge people, because they have no worldview where they're pressured to say, you need to build your energy up, you need to build your body up, you need to build your compelling power up, you need to build ambition up. They have no way of saying this type of stuff. The ideology as it's manifest is just not good. Now, it's not like the Nietzscheans can ever sometimes be better. You often get Nietzscheans that are like, there is no morality, I'm just going to, I'm going to set up a polyamory brothel here and all this type of stuff. That is my will to power. Like, that's obviously silly as well. But the Nietzscheans, I meet an awful lot more Nietzscheans who have their head on straight, who are more in the body, who are more instinctive, who because I think it's because Nietzsche empowers ambition. I think Nietzsche suggests that it's okay to want to create stuff. It's okay to want to create a reality around yourself. He, in some sense, flatters and rewards the masculine instincts of wanting to build, wanting to be a first principle, wanting to be a creator. He does that better than Jung, and for that reason, he is more solid to build a foundation upon, because we want that creative spirit to flourish. We want the artist to be able to release their energy. We don't want the artist to be like Jung, where they get caught up reading the symbols that they're trying to interpret through and rationalizing what's going on. We don't really care what it means. We want to feel the energy of it as it's released. That's really the true thing that we're looking for. I don't want to be a part of a society that figures it all out. You don't want that. You might think you do, but you don't. There's no joy in that. That's death. That's when you're studying the movie after it has happened. You want to be experiencing the thing. You want the joy of it going on as it happens, this type of thing. And this is the sort of surrender that we're talking about. And so the axiomatic foundation that you could build a civilization upon, or build an individual upon, is actually about getting that charge in place. If that charge is not in place, if the person is not nakedly honoring their instincts and going about trying to create a reality for themselves, building a life around themselves, and listening to their instincts and actually trusting them and ambitiously trying to make them happen, there is no point in almost anything else. Everything else becomes irrelevant. Everything else becomes pointless because it's just a low energy person who is grabbing onto maybe like a Jungian ideology that is just cope. It just turns into cope. It turns into a failure. It's not useful. It doesn't do anything. It just turns into actually a labyrinth of thoughts that don't go anywhere. It's a waste of time. It's nogginism. It's delusion. It's in the way. And so what I'm getting at is that if I am to surrender my higher thinking and finally embrace an ideology that frees me from cognition, frees me from metacognition, frees me from hesitation, frees me from rock sitting and pondering, frees me from philosophy, frees me from this nogginist nonsense. I need something. I need to believe that what I'm engaging in is something that is real. And in some sense, I think this is why Nietzsche is such a brilliant thinker. And people miss this so much. They often say stuff, for example, that Nietzsche is contradictory. It's complete bullshit. He's not. He's very coherent, almost all the time he's coherent. It's just that he's super shocking and super against most people's sensibilities, so they have to cope by being like, oh, Nietzsche, contradictory, all these type of things. No, Nietzsche was very, very coherent. He was very axiomatic. He presents very straightforward, well put together first principles, like I said, and he consistently talks about them, and most of his ideas are built upon these, and when you have these in place, it becomes quite easy to understand an awful lot what he's saying. He's not mysterious, he's very, very straightforward with this type of stuff. And I think the key aspect of this is that his understanding, his true understanding of what it means to be scientific, what it means to be creative, what it means to be to do philosophy and construct what science means, which is knowledge, which is a correct worldview. Nietzsche says that science is nature represented as concepts, represented as abstractions. What you should be doing, as I said at the very start, is you should be observing the world and seeing reality, nature, without any judgment, without any ideology that you've inherited down from your tradition or your society or whatever it is, and instead see, look, observe, study. You see these patterns, and then you grab these patterns and you represent them as ideas, as concepts. Nietzsche proposed, for example, master morality and slave morality. He says that he is observing these natural processes happening in society, ignoring the book cope, ignoring the rationality, ignoring the nogginism, and he's looking at all these patterns that are happening in society, in social relations, and he's conceptualizing this as master morality and slave morality and offering it to us as a concept, as a scientific concept, a concept that we can add to our body of knowledge. He suggests the same thing about, for example, the will to power, or the energy, whatever it is. He's suggesting it's like, this is the axiom here you go, take a look at this type of stuff. And he's presenting this stuff all the time. He's asking you to look at this stuff and add it to our body of knowledge, because if we do this, this becomes true. And ultimately, he says that the goal is that we all gather together and find enough of these and get serious enough about our perspective that we actually focus on our goal, to understand finally that our goal is that we want to create a beautiful society like ancient Greece, like Rome, like the West. We want a renaissance. We want that stuff to happen. But the problem is that we can't decide beforehand, rationalism and being nice to people. We can't decide that that's how that happens if it's not true. We have to go to causes. We have to go to what creates this stuff on first principle and go there. And Nietzsche says when you observe, it's never, oh, were you nice enough to your neighbor and then a renaissance happens next week. That's never what happens. It's usually the aggressive, creative, competitive, charged energy of people who had been through maybe an extreme period of stress that creates this sort of fireball of energy within them. And then these people compete, and then out of that comes a fertile, profound, and powerful culture. And this is ultimately what we're trying to do. And the reason why we are in such a terrible state in the West now is because of all these years, because of this power of civilization, first of all, but all these years of, you could say, book cope and rewarding through philosophy and Christianity and now psychology of rationalism and book cope, is that we've developed into intellectual neurotic nogginists, and we've almost completely severed our ability to get in touch with our instincts, to the parody now that we go into psychologists where we want to fix our minds, and of course they bullshit us, aren't able to do it, and prescribe us fucking drugs, which is basically chemicals to alleviate the body of any will, just turn the body off and this type of thing. This is what it's come to because it's such a disaster. It's so badly done. And basically, what has happened is that this collection of errors and mistakes, this tumbling problem of errors and mistakes, this unawareness of the reality of the charge, and this inability to organize ourselves and say, all right, how do we get scientific about this? How do we focus on a true knowledge and worldview and perspective so that we can create these beautiful renaissances, this beautiful Roman society, this beautiful Greek society, this beautiful Western society with all these beautiful cathedrals and all this? How do we make this stuff happen? Well, the way we make this stuff happen is we figure out what causes it. We figure out how to create this charge. And if we don't do this, it's almost like the opposite is going to happen. We're going to have people who deny this for long enough that it's going to turn into something even worse than this. And this is, of course, his prophecy of the last man. He suggests that he saw around him the way the people were thinking, the way the people were approaching this stuff, the amount of denial that was going on about what happens underneath the neck, that we're going to lead to a point where you're going to have an arrogant, the individual in general is going to be an arrogant, selfish, low-thinking, unambitious, happy guy consumer. Someone who sits there and chomps up the Amazon in order to turn it into soybean fields. Someone who sits there and eats the disgusting fast food meats that require the torturing of animals in order to fulfill his desires because he righteously deserves this. Someone who sits there drinking beer and watching sports. Someone who sees that the entire harvest of humanity in the future was also his belly could get filled, also his pride could get flattered. The last man, the greedy, lazy fuck who is going to claim the earth, eat the whole world up, the useless Chewbacca muncher that's going to eat the whole world up, grow swollen and fat like a honeybee that has too much, and then just destroy the world for his will.